And I'll be dealing with ulcerative vesiculobullous lesions, TMJ disorders, burning mouth syndrome, and oral manifestations of systemic disorders. Now, as Madam said in the first lecture itself, that it is not possible to cover each and every topic. So, what I'll be doing, I'll be restricting myself to the rapid revision only. You will see in my presentation, I have marked certain things with asterisks or changed font color. Now, these are the questions or the aspects which are frequently asked. But let me clarify myself here by saying this. I do not mean that these will be asked in your exam. So, rest assured. So, let's quickly start. Now, this is the story or the saga of each one of us when we are a dental student. So, whole year, generally, it is a picnic. And during the exam and night before the exam, most of us have this situation. So, how we can avoid this? We can avoid this by planning, preparing, and then performing. So, for exam, you do not only have to study hard, you have to study very, very smartly. And one of the most important way to do it is to go through the previous year question papers and see what are the frequently asked questions, which are the aspects which are must know for you, which are the ones which are good to know, and which are the ones which are nice to know. So, starting with the first topic, that is UNVB or ulcerative vesicular bullous lesions of oral mucosa. It is the bread and butter of us oral physicians, and for you, it is a very, very important topic. And believe me, when I was going through the question papers of last 10 to 15 years, I saw UVB has come as a long question in as many as 5 examinations. So that makes it must to know topic. I will be dealing with classification, herpes infection, herpangina, recurrent aphthous stomatitis, erythema multiforme, pemphigus, and anal. Each one of them have been asked previously as a long question also, as a short question also, some aspects of it could be asked. So listen to it carefully. Before that, I must say that it is also important for you to remember the definitions of the basic lesions. So, ulcers, vesicles, bulla, macules, papules, all these are important. So, sticking to our topic today, ulcer is the break in continuity of epithelium, which is caused by cell death. Vesicle is a sharply circumscribed serous fluid filled elevation up to 1 centimeter in diameter. And bulla is a sharply circumscribed, same kind, it's a big vesicle. So it is a serous fluid filled elevation which is more than 1 centimeter in diameter. Coming to the classification, which is very, very important. The first classification that I'll be dealing with is the one given in Burkitt, the classic one. So here it has been all the lesions according to their clinical presentation. So whether the presentation is acute, chronic, recurrent, single ulcers, multiple, they have been classified into 4 categories. The first one is patient with acute multiple lesion. The examples are viral stomatitis, erythema multiforme, and so on, as you all know it. Second category is patient with recurrent oral ulcers. Now, you must remember what is the difference between a recurrent and a chronic lesion. Now, the patient will give you a history of the lesion persisting since a long time. But in recurrent lesion, there is a disease-free episode between 2 episodes of the lesion, whereas chronic persists at the same time. So the recurrent lesion could happen at the same site or some other site, whereas chronic lesion will be persisting at the same site. So example of recurrent oral ulcers, all of you know recurrent aphthous stomatitis, Behçet's disease. Then the third category is patient with chronic multiple lesions. Some chronic lesions like pemphigus, pemphigoid, erosive and bullous lichen planus, they lie in this. Then patients with single ulcers. So deep fungal infections like histoplasmosis, chronic herpes simplex infection lie in this category. Now there's another classification which you can quote if you want those brownie points. And this is based on etiology. The detailed reference you can get from Regzi and Scuba, that is the textbook. Now they have divided these all lesions, what we talked about in the first classification, into 2 categories, ulcerative and vesicular bullous. In ulcerative lesions, they have further classified them according to etiology into reactive lesions, bacterial infections, fungal infections, immunological diseases, and ulcers related to the neoplasm. Whereas vesiculobullous lesion, they have divided into viral diseases, immunological diseases, and hereditary diseases. So sometimes the examiners might ask you this classification also, so you can read from the book mentioned below. Coming to the first and most frequently asked lesion is the acute viral stomatitis. Now, the viral stomatitis and acute, so stomatitis, inflammation of mouth caused by virus, which is acute in presentation. If you remember and understand the meaning of the title, you will be able to write the clinical features. And that applies to all the lesions. When sometimes you cannot recall, try to correlate with the name of the lesion. So the most common viral lesions which affect the stoma or mouth are the primary herpes simplex infection, varicella zoster virus infection, and Coxsackie virus infection. Primary herpes simplex infection, which is also known as acute herpetic gingivostomatitis. I'm not going to read out the details. What are the points that you must remember? It is caused by herpes simplex virus 1, most common in children from 6 months to 6 years of age. Children below 6 months of age are generally protected by maternal antibodies. The primary infection occurs during subsequent childhood. Very elderly patients and immunocompromised patients may also get infected by this. Transmission is through close personal contact. What are the symptoms and the signs? Any viral infection, you have to remember the characteristically they have prodromal symptoms. And most common prodromal symptoms are fever, nausea. All right. In case of herpetic gingivostomatitis, symptoms also include painful mouth ulcers. The patient will complain of increased salivation and difficulty in eating and swallowing. We come to signs. Viral infections typically present in forms of vesicles. They are purely vesicular diseases. All right. And these vesicles are very thin walled. So because of the movement of the oral mucosa, they rupture rapidly and they form shallow ulcers. Now, these are surrounded by inflammation. There will be an inflammatory halo around it. Many a times, these ulcers, shallow ulcers, they coalesce together and form large ulcers with ragged border. And they might have tissue tags. So here only I'll add that you also have to remember the difference between primary ulcers and secondary ulcers. So primary ulcers are the ulcers which are de novo, like traumatic ulcer. Secondary ulcers are the one which form from the pre-existing lesions, like in primary herpes simplex infection. So they always have a tissue tag present with it. Sometimes they twist it and ask it in a MCQ. What are the characteristic feature of acute marginal gingivitis? Most important is appearance of generalized acute marginal gingivitis. This is going to help you to differentiate it from other lesions. Okay. And it will be accompanied with fever and cervical lymphadenopathy. So here you can see this. How do we manage? Now this is a tip for you people. Management of any lesion, go back and see the pathophysiology and the symptoms. So our aim or any aim of any managed treatment is to either cure the pathophysiology or manage the signs. Now, viral infections are self-limiting diseases. So here we can manage the symptoms. So remember, what are the symptoms? First, pain. So you can give topical anesthetic rinses. Patient gives history of fever. Antipyretic agents like paracetamol can be given. Patient is unable to eat and swallow. So maintenance of hydration, especially because the children get dehydrated very fast. So maintenance of hydration. And what is the physiology, pathophysiology? Viral infection. So you can use antiviral agents. So acyclovir, most commonly given antiviral agent, topically or systemically can be given in the doses that I have mentioned on the slide. 3% ointment or 15 milligram per kg 5 times daily for 7 days. It is available under the trade name of Zovirax. Coming to varicella zoster virus infection. Now, when I was a student, I always used to get confused. Then how did I remember? First word in the varicella zoster is the primary infection. So primary infection in children is varicella or what we commonly call chickenpox. Now, what happens? These viruses have an affinity for the neural ganglion. So once the remission of that episode happens, they like, the terrorists. They just go and get latent in spinal or cranial nerve ganglia and आराम से बैठते उधर. Whenever there's a reactivation, reactivation could be because of different triggers. For example, it could be fever, or it could be immunocompromised state or anything. So the reactivation occurs and the secondary infection occurs in adults mostly, and that is herpes zoster, or what we also call shingles. So I think it is clear with you that the primary infection is varicella, and what happens in the later structure, later state, is the herpes zoster or shingles infection. What points you must remember about herpes zoster or shingles, which is very commonly asked, is that it is caused by reactivation, occurs in adults, both the genders are affected. Very characteristically, lesions are limited to the skin or mucosa, which are supplied by the affected nerve. In oral lesions, of course, the trigeminal nerve is involved. Sometimes the lesion may be missing, and you will see that the patient complains only the pain along the nerve. So this is called herpes sinus herpes. Herpes ke bina herpes. So the lesion is not visible, but the patient complains of pain. The symptom consists of, since it is acute again, shooting pain, burning sensation, tenderness, and paresthesia along the course of nerve, and very, very painful blisters on skin and mucosa, which later form a scab. So what are the signs? Now, what I have marked in red, you have to remember. The distribution is limited to skin and mucosa, which is supplied by affected nerve, and they characteristically do not cross the midline. All right. So oral lesions are similar to the herpes, but they will not cross the midline. So these two characteristic clinical feature will help you in differentiating it from other acute lesions. Okay. And it heals in another 14 to 21 days, but it heals with scab formation. And the episodes are very extensive, and multiple dermatome are involved in immunocompromised patients or very elderly patients. Complications you have to remember. The most important and commonly asked complication is post-herpetic neuralgia. That is, after the remission also, the patient might complain of pain along the nerve. So that is herpetic neuralgia. Secondary bacterial infection can occur if on the ulcerations, and then paralysis of affected area. Ma'am has already covered Ramsay Hunt syndrome, but I would like to emphasize it again. It has been asked many times. It is the herpes zoster infection of geniculate ganglion, which consists of Bell's palsy, unilateral vesicles of external ears, vesicles in oral mucosa. How do you manage? Again, apply the same logic. So pain, anesthetic rinses, analgesics, antiviral therapy can be given, but antiviral therapy is generally effective only if it is instituted between 3 days of appearance of rash. So you can give acyclovir again, 100 milligram tablet, 5 times daily for 10 days. To prevent secondary infection, you can give systemic antibiotic. Another catch is here, which many a times you will be asked. Now you all know steroids are contraindicated in viral infections because they decrease the immunity and it becomes fulminant. But systemic steroids for pain reduction and prevention of post-herpetic neuralgia. This is the only viral condition in which systemic steroids are used and are found to be effective. So many a times this may be asked in Viva. Coming to the next virus, that is Coxsackie. So Coxsackie infection, most important is herpangina. And what you have to remember the most is the differential diagnosis between herpangina and HSV. So herpetic gingival stomatitis. So the thing is that if you remember this table, you will be able to write the clinical features also of herpangina. So herpangina occurs in epidemics. Milder, smaller lesions are there. Lesions occur on the pharynx and the posterior part of the oral mucosa characteristically. Whereas in HSV, it affects the anterior portion of the mouth. Characteristically, HSV will have acute marginal gingivitis, which will be absent in herpangina. And histopathologically, HSV will show ballooning degeneration, multinucleated giant cell, and intranuclear inclusions known as Lipschutz bodies, which is not there in herpangina. So remember this table, it was very commonly asked. Coming to the next, that is erythema multiforme, very often asked in long question. You must have read about it in detail, but we'll quickly revise the points that you should remember. It is named erythema because there is redness, multiforme because there presence of multiple types of lesions. So there could be vesicle, bulla, ulcerations, macules, and has two clinical forms, erythema multiforme simplex and erythema multiforme complex. The very characteristic onset it has an explosive onset, so like a bomb it comes, sudden and very severe. Okay, and physiology is it is caused by deposition of immune complexes in superficial vasculature of skin and mucosa, so that describes why that erythema. However, known causes are not known there, but it could be secondary to certain drugs which are administered sometimes in HCV infections and all that. Okay, so what are the symptoms and signs? Symptoms are appearance of rash and painful bleeding blisters, fever and malaise. Oral involvement is also very painful. Signs in cases of simplex, there could be maculopapular rash on the skin and characteristic target lesions. In case of complex, these rashes are very, very severe, and there is severe vesiculobullous involvement of skin, oral mucosa, and genitalia also. And then it is called Stevens Johnson's syndrome. So there are two characteristic features that you have to remember and which will help you in differentiating erythema multiforme from other acute lesions. First is the bullseye, target, or the iris lesion. These are very, very characteristic. And the second, if oral involvement is there, it is the bloody incrustation of lips. So two B's, bullseye and bloody incrustation, characteristic feature. Another thing that you have to remember is the severe denudation of mucosa and skin. If it occurs, that is known as TEN or toxic epidermal necrolysis. How do you manage? So symptomatic relief, 5% igno or benzathymine can be given. Topical steroids, Canacort, triamcinolone acetonide in ora base can be given for oral lesions. You have to give the supportive treatment, soft, liquid, high protein diet and IV fluids. And short-term high-dose systemic steroids can be given. Now, again, you remember, generally, systemic steroids are very long-term. In erythema multiforme, short-term high-dose systemic steroids can be given. Prednisolone, 20 mg tablet twice a day for 5 days, or betamethasone, 0.5 mg tablet thrice daily for 5 days. All right. Now, coming to the next, that is the recurrent aphthous stomatitis. This is a very simple, very common lesion, but is also very commonly asked in examination. So I'll just rush through some points that you must remember. Aphtha in aphthous stands for whitish. So aphthous, ulceration. These are characteristically well-defined ulcerations which are surrounded by erythematous halo. There are three clinical forms, minor, major, and herpetiform. Another question, quite a favorite of examiner, major RAS is also known as Sutton's disease or a tongue twister, periadenitis mucosa, necrotica recurrens, if you can remember it. So rather than going through the clinical features of each one of this, I have made a table for your quick revision. So gender predilection is same in minor and major form. Herpetiform is more commonly seen in females. And age of onsets, you can see it is different. Number of ulcers is about 1 to 4 in minor. Major is usually single, whereas herpetiform it's multiple, so about 10 to 100. The size of ulcer is less than 1 centimeter in minor, greater than 1 centimeter in major, and herpetiform a small pinpoint, herpetiform. So they resemble herpetic ulcerations. So they are smaller, 1 to 3 mm. They are self-healing in nature, and site predilection, as you can see in the table, they generally occur on the movable mucosa. Another very important question, which is very, very commonly asked in exam, is how will you differentiate between recurrent aphthous ulcer and recurrent herpetic stomatitis? Very important. I have marked it with double asterisk. So wide range of age in recurrent aphthous ulcer, herpetic stomatitis more common in middle and older age. Remember the site, very important. It is mobile, non-keratinized mucosa in recurrent aphthous, whereas it is the vermilion border of lips in case of herpes labialis, and non-mobile keratinized mucosa in RIHS, recurrent intraoral herpes stomatitis. So very important point to remember. Initial lesions you can see here. The mature lesions, aphthous ulcers are shallow and the size you can see. Yellow necrotic centers will be there with a red halo, whereas recurrent herpetic stomatitis, many ulcers coalesce together to form large lesions, so they will have irregular margins. So this is another important question we covered. Okay. Then how will you manage? You all must be knowing, many of you must be experiencing this also during exam because of stress. So you have to identify and eliminate if any predisposing factor. Symptomatic relief can be given, topical steroids can be given, and another thing that you have to remember is that you can give tetracycline mouthwash in cases of herpetiform recurrent aphthous stomatitis. So remember, tetracycline mouthwash, herpetiform RAS. Okay, then coming to ANAC, that is acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. I'm sure perio people also must have taken this. So we'll quickly run through the points to remember. It is also known as Vincent's infection or trench mouth. It involves the free gingival margin, crest of gingiva, and interdental papilla. The causative agents are Fusobacterium nucleatum and Borrelia vincenti. Trigger factors could be a lot many things. So stress, recent illness, smoking, immunosuppression, etc. could trigger it. So clinical features most commonly in young and middle-aged. Symptoms are sudden onset with pain, tenderness, salivation is increased, spontaneous bleeding could occur from gingival tissue, characteristically loss of sense of taste, and a typical fetid odor, which is very unpleasant to the patients. What are the signs? Slight mobility and apparent extrusion of the teeth, and the red ones that you have to remember. And NUG, necrotizing. So necrosis happens. So there's a necrotic pseudomembrane, which is grayish green in color, which is formed. And ulcerative, the ulcers are typically present as a punched out crater like erosions in interdental papilla. So these two features you have to remember, and they are associated with regional lymphadenopathy. How do you treat ANAC? So different phases is there. What are our aims? You have to see. First is control of bacteria phase. So you can do local debridement. You can use antibiotics both for the gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. So amoxicillin and metronidazole. Some painkillers like paracetamol, and antipyretic could be added. And very importantly, 2% hydrogen peroxide mouthwash can be used, which helps in sloughing of the necrosis. Second is elimination of local and systemic predisposing factors. So scaling and root planing to remove local irritants, periodontal surgery and rinsing, patient education and counseling about habits and proper oral hygiene could be done. Now the last lesion from UVB, pemphigus. You all know it is potentially fatal chronic vesiculobullous disease. Two forms affect the oral cavity the most. Pemphigus vulgaris and Pemphigus vegetans. It occurs in 40 to 60 years age group. The etiopathogenesis is important. Now this happens because there is an autoimmune response against desmoglein, or the material which attaches to cells. So intercellular substances. This causes separation of them, or what is called acantholysis, and there is formation of intraepithelial bulla, which quickly bursts and causes large erosions. So what are the symptoms? There could be chronic multiple blistering of skin. Oral symptoms could be denudation of mucosa, burning sensation, and difficulty in chewing and swallowing. So signs are multiple thin walled bullae. Generally, we don't see it because it ruptures very fast. Remember, it shows Nikolsky sign. Nikolsky sign has two aspects. Application of pressure or unaffected skin or mucosa causes bulla formation, or application of pressure on intact bulla causes lateral spread. So remember these two aspects. Remember Nikolsky sign. It is asked in SAQ and MCQ, of course. Diagnosis, histopathologically, you can see the Zank cells. And immunofluorescence studies are also very important to differentiate it from pemphigoid and all. And you can see the antigen-antibody reaction along the prickle cell layer of epithelium. Management is again long duration systemic steroids, immunosuppressants, antimicrobials, oral lesions, and fluid replacement. So commonly asked GDs. Now Listen carefully. These are the questions which are very commonly asked, especially in SAQ and Viva also. So I had just gone through the previous year question papers and made a list for you. So between acute herpetic gingival stomatitis and ANAC, between erythema multiforme and allergic stomatitis, RAS and RIHs, which we already covered, between pemphigus and erosive lichen planus, between erythema multiforme and RAS, and primary herpetic gingival stomatitis and herpangina. Many of them I covered, many of them you can easily write because you know the clinical features. There are some good to know terminologies also, which you should know, many times asked in MCQs and sometimes asked in Viva. Patch test, pathogy test, what is herpetic whitlow, cytomegalovirus infection, use of corticosteroids in UVB lesions, indication and contraindication, zoster sine herpeti, post-herpetic neuralgia, stomatitis veniata and medicamentosa, 10, NUP, necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis, Crohn's disease, Becher syndrome, cold sores, paraneoplastic pemphigus, and pemphigoid. So these are the terminologies when you're revising, quickly revise them from the book. You should know what they are. Generally, they will not come. Apart from patch test, nothing has come as a short question yet, but they are important things to know. All right. So I hope I have tried to condense a lot of matter in UVB lesion in these slides. I hope they are helpful to you. Quickly, let's move to another very important topic, that is temporomandibular joint disorders. But if you see the question papers or for the BDS level, what we were taught, the most important things that you have to remember is the classification, MPDS, and imaging. So I'm restricting my lecture to these three things. Okay. So first is the classification of TMJ disorders. Now, first is the disorder abnormalities of the cranial and mandibular bone. So they are of two types, developmental and acquired. Developmental like aplasia, acquired like neoplasia. Second is another component of TMJ. Okay, so the TMJ disorders per se in that mechanism. So there's disc displacement with or without reduction, dislocation, inflammatory conditions like synovitis, capsulitis, arthritis, and ankylosis. And the third category is masticatory muscle disorders, in which most commonly asked and very important for you is myofascial pain dysfunction syndrome. So we'll go to this, we'll deal this in detail. What you have to remember, it was named by Laskin. It is also known as Costin syndrome. It has multifactorial pathogenesis. Diagnosis is based on symptoms and signs in absence of radiographic changes. So there's no radiographic changes. Generally, a psychophysiological, psychosocial theory is given for its occurrence. It has a very unpredictable natural course, and the patient might tell you that they have an episode of exacerbation and regression. It has been very potently correlated with the stress, and people have described that there's a vicious cycle which takes place, which leads to MPDS. So patients who are very high strung or have anxiety and stress generally have parafunctional habits. This causes excessive strain on muscles, which again causes muscle fatigue and pain. This could be exacerbated if the patient has certain malocclusion, occlusal trauma, or jaw injuries. So, because of this muscle fatigue and pain, an imbalance occurs, in neuromuscular complex, and it also is the reason for the chronicity of the disease. And this again leads to more anxiety and stress. So this cycle goes on. And why I want you to remember this cycle is that when we manage, our aim is to break the cycle at one point. So when we discuss its management, you will realize that either I can take care of the anxiety stress, so I can break the cycle here, or parafunctional habit ke liye, or it's the muscle fatigue and pain ke liye. So we have to decide in the patient, टेलर मेक द मैनेजमेंट फॉर ईच पेशेंट कि कहाँ पे इंटरप्ट करना है, कहाँ पे इंटरवीन करना है. So that is the key of successful management of MPDS. Okay. So what are the symptoms? Chronic, poorly localized intermittent, dull aching pain, restricted mouth opening, clicking sound is present. Patient might also complain of morning jaw stiffness and weakness of the masticatory muscles. So what are the signs? Tenderness over the joint or muscles of mastication. The most Commonly involved muscles of mastication is masseter or lateral pterygoid. Characteristically, there is presence of trigger point in muscles. There is reduced mouth opening and there could be jaw deviation or movement. So what are the things that are present? Restricted mouth opening, clicking, right? And tenderness, presence of trigger point. What is missing is the localization. And second is any radiographic changes. So these are the cardinal signs, positive and negative signs of MPDS. And how do you manage MPDS? As I told you before, you have to see the cycle and where to break it. So first is for the psychological aspect, you should do the patient counseling. You can use physiotherapy, which requires, hot, moist compresses or coolant sprays. Jaw exercises against resistance is very, very important. To alleviate the pain, analgesics can be given, ibuprofen, or you can do topical application of counter irritants like capsaicin or piroxicam. They have been used very, very effectively. Then you can use anxiolytic and muscle relaxant with due caution. You have to say that the patients do not get used to it. So you can use diazepam 5 mg tablet at bedtime for 7 to 10 days just to alleviate the stress. For trigger points, you can use local anesthetic injections. If you feel there is some parafunctional habits the patient shows, use habit breaking appliances, repositioning devices. If there's some occlusal corrections to be done, do that. You can also try transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation or TENS, which has been successfully used for these patients. And another very important thing is biofeedback. So remember, MPDS, I have to break the vicious cycle. So if you remember the cycle, you will be able to write the management. All right. Prognosis is still unpredictable. Another question that comes very commonly is the TMJ imaging. Now, TMJ imaging is divided into conventional and the advanced imaging modalities. In conventional, lateral skulls reverse down, and what we know as TMJ projections. Very important. I have changed the font color. Transcranial, transorbital, and transpharyngeal are very commonly asked, and you must know them. The other imaging techniques are panoramic radiography, arthrography, CT, and MRI. So these are the three TMJ projections in specific. Sometimes they are asked in the technique. I will not go into the details of technique. It will take a long time to do this. So I suggest you to read it from White and Furrow. What is commonly asked, and I want you to must remember, is the indication and area of joint seen in each one of these. So indications of first, that is transcranial view, is the TMJ pain, internal derangement, only for seeing the bony structure changes and range of movement of joints because it is done, open close. So area of joint seen is lateral aspect of glenoid fossa. Okay. Then articular eminence and the condylar head, and you can also appreciate the joint space. Transpharyngeal view, again, it is indicated for TMJ pain dysfunction, for arthritis and pathologies like condylar head, cyst and tumors, fracture of neck and condyle. Area of the joint seen, you can see the lateral view. You can see the condylar head and the condylar neck, and you can see the articular surface. So any morphological abnormalities can be detected in this. It is also known as infracranial view or the McQueen-Dell view. Coming to transorbital, I always used to be fascinated with this view. You know how you direct it from the orbit and to the contralateral TMJ. It's also known as the Jimmer projection. It is peculiar and many a times asked in MCQ because it is the only TMJ view which gives the anterior view of TMJ. Okay, and you can see the medial and lateral pole of condyle. And it is very, very useful in trauma and fracture cases because it will give you an idea of the medial displacement of fractured condyle and fracture of neck of condyle. So remember these three views. But apart from this, now because of time constraint, I cannot cover everything. But you also must know these terminologies. They have been asked once or more. One is DD of trismus for short notes. Please read it. Then radiographic features of osteoarthritis. Just remember the terminologies. Osteophytes, Ellis cyst, joint mice, and for rheumatoid arthritis, pencil-shaped condyle, And what is in juvenile? Toadstool appearance. These are important from MCQ and Viva. Imaging modalities, you should know other modalities also like MRI and arthrography. Generally, it just comes as enumeration. You should know that bird facies is seen in ankylosis. You should know what is click, what is crepitus, and what is reciprocal click. For example, reciprocal click is seen in anterior disc displacement with reduction. And you must know from practical point of view, examination of TMJ and muscles of mastication. So I have just shortlisted the topics which you must also know. All right. So now coming to the last part of my presentation, that is oral manifestation of systemic diseases. So I'll be covering diabetes mellitus, HIV, and anemia. Now, what are some tips? Now, you just must think that I'm just giving tips, but actually, this is rapid revision, and I am just sharing how I studied for OMR during my BDS. Or, we used to go to our seniors and just tell them, please take what is important. So, I'm going in that direction. So, one tip that I want to share is generally short notes and MCQs are asked on specific appearances and investigations in cases of systemic diseases. You must know the oral manifestations of diabetes mellitus, HIV, and anemia. In this, iron deficiency and pernicious anemia in particular, leukemia, oral manifestation has been asked once. Then Plummer-Vinson syndrome, Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, hemophilias, thalassemias, the radiographic features. What are the definition of petechiae, purpura, and ecchymosis? Radiographic features in hyperparathyroidism and polycythemia vera. Generally, MCQ comes, ruddy cyanosis is seen in 4 options. The right answer is polycythemia vera. So I'm just giving you a very exam-oriented picture of frequently asked questions. But again, to emphasize, these are frequently asked, not necessarily these will be asked for your exam. So coming to the very important and what we have been, studying every time, what are the oral manifestations of diabetes mellitus? So proposed oral manifestation of diabetes mellitus include burning mouth syndrome, candidiasis, dentinal caries, periodontitis, and the entire list is there. Sometimes you might be asked why, exacerbated periodontitis occurs in this. So the cause of increased susceptibility to periodontal diseases is because of these reasons: alteration in host response, alteration in subgingival microflora. So it becomes, the changes, the ecosystem has changed because there is more sugar content over there, right? So the subgingival microflora changes, which causes more destruction in the presence of same local conditions. Then altered collagen metabolism, decreased vascularity. As you know, the microcapillaries are hindered in diabetes mellitus, and compromised neutrophil function. Because of all this, there is increased susceptibility to periodontal diseases in diabetes mellitus. This is asked. Sometimes Greenspan syndrome has come in the MCQ. So you must know what is Greenspan. So now actually they say that this terminology should be obsolete. Still, for record and for history's sake, Greenspan is a triad of diabetes mellitus, hypertension, and find out what is next. Just remember the name. Then coming to the next, oral manifestations of anemia. Most commonly asked are iron deficiency anemia and Plummer-Vinson syndrome. So iron deficiency anemia, as you can see, I have marked with red. Characteristically, you will see mucosal pallor, atrophy of lingual papillae, atrophy of oral mucous membrane, and loss of normal keratinization, which makes it more susceptible to erosion and other things. It could be accompanied by soreness and burning of the tongue and angular stomatitis. Plummer-Vinson syndrome, as you all know, is a pre-malignant condition. It is characterized by dysphagia and microcytic hypochromic anemia. You will see a smooth and often sore tongue, dry mouth, koilorhynchia, and angular stomatitis, and characteristically dysphagia, which is caused by the cricothyroidal web. Plummer-Vinson has also been asked multiple times as SAQ. Coming to pernicious anemia, what you have to remember is the Hunter's glossitis. That is the fiery appearance of tongue in case of pernicious anemia. It causes glossitis and mucosal ulceration, and the patient complains of burning sensation, taste disturbances, and decreased salivation. For sickle cell anemia, radiography features are important. So you see hair on end appearance, just like in thalassemia, but not as common as in thalassemia. Then you see the step ladder appearance of trabeculae and large irregular marrow spaces. Okay. Coming to oral manifestations of HIV, which is again very commonly asked, and I'm sure all the subjects have taught you this, but just for the revision, there are some more common diseases and some less common diseases. More common diseases include infections in this fungal, viral, and bacterial. The ones which are marked in the red are kind of pathognomonic for HIV infection. So pseudomembranous candidiasis in viral infection, fulminant infection. So the severity is more in case of HIV. So you will see herpes simplex, varicella zoster, EB virus infection, including hairy leukoplakia. Remember, hairy leukoplakia is not a leukoplakia, it is an infection and is associated with HIV. Bacterial infection, HIV associated gingivitis and periodontitis, necrotizing gingivitis. Tumors, remember Kaposi sarcoma, short notes has been asked. So Kaposi sarcoma is there, and then persistent lymphadenopathy. These are the more common diseases. Less common diseases include infections like deep mycotic lesions, cryptococcosis, histoplasmosis, viral HPV and cytomegalovirus, Mycobacterium tuberculosis and Klebsiella infection in bacterial infection. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a less commonly found oral manifestation of HIV. And then neurological diseases, paresthesia, facial palsy, and dysphagia. There are miscellaneous manifestation of HIV, which include recurrent apathy, progressive necrotizing ulceration, delayed wound healing, purpura, and pigmentation. Now, oral manifestation of systemic disease is a sagar. And what I have tried to do is to collect some pearls from it. But you will have to read it further. The best books to refer for this is Sonis, Scully, and of course our Bible, that is the Burkitt. So I'm sure you'll go back and read a little, but just for giving you some tips, again, some good to know facts. One is ulcer in agranulocytosis will lack an inflammatory halo, and that differentiates it from other ulcers. You must know the characteristics of tubercular ulcers. You must know the management of patients with diabetes mellitus, von Willebrand disease. You must know angioneurotic edema for a short question. You must know small points like Benz-Jones protein is seen in multiple myeloma. Generalized loss of lamina dura, osteitis fibrosa cystica, brown tumor is seen in hyperparathyroidism. Chipmunk appearance, hair on end appearance, thalassemia. Lantern jaw, hyperpituitarism. So the tip is that for scoring more, and you should be very good at these, the examiner is never going to ask what is normally present in everything. Pick up what is different from others. How I used to study, I used to go back to the index of the book and go on reading the terminologies. Acha, this one I know, and whichever terminology I don't know, read the, the page number, go back and read from this. This is a very good way of preparing for not so long questions. Okay, coming to the last lesion, that is burning mouth syndrome. So is it burning sensation due to secondary cause? That is in the causes which are known? No, that is not burning mouth syndrome. Burning mouth syndrome, this terminology is, typically used for burning sensation with no detectable causes. Clinical features, it is seen in females more than males, especially in perimenopausal women. And it is commonly seen in anxious and very high-strung patients. So there's a psychosocial connection or association which has been speculated, and it is commonly associated with xerostomia. Why I'm finishing it in one slide? Because generally you will get a SAQ. Management is to rule out underlying cause, patient counseling, and to alleviate that anxiety. You can give low dose of TCAs like amitriptyline, but all this has to be done under supervision. So because sometimes the patients get addicted to it, okay, or there could be abuse of drugs. So, well, that was the very, very rapid revision for all of you. And I'm sure with the pointers I have given and what I have suggested you to read this, and this from these many books, this is going to be your condition next. And if this doesn't work, it will be this. Okay? So, all the best. May God be with you. Stay safe.